Well, this video is way overdue, but regardless of my terrible planning and scheduling, welcome, everyone, to my 1000 subscriber special. If you have clicked on this video without reading the title, you might be asking the question of what I'm going to be doing for this video. Well, my answer to that is... just read the fucking title, you monk. I'm going over my top 20 favorite animated movies of all time. A few things must be clear before we begin, however. I know it seems obvious, but I have to say it regardless if you're complaining. This is my opinion on these movies. I don't care if you dislike them. Also, keep in mind that I am not treating my opinions as facts, and you are very welcome to tell me your favorite animated movies in the comments. Number 2, just because something is at the lower point of the list does not mean it's bad. I believe that every movie on this list is great in some way, which is why I'm simply narrowing it down to a top 20, because if I didn't, then we'd be here all day. Also, just a heads up, there are quite a few Disney and Pixar movies on this list, and I do apologize for that, but they are the two kings of animation for a reason. But I do think my number 1 choice will surprise you in some way. Anyway, let's go on to the countdown. At number 20... Wreck-It Ralph. When this movie first came out, nobody expected it to be as good as it was because, well, when was the last time you watched a video game movie that didn't suck? And while Wreck-It Ralph may have a lot of 80s gaming nostalgia injected into it, as it stands, it's a very entertaining and fun film without a single moment that disrupted it. It's just this endless ball of energy that constantly has your attention. The characters are very charming, likable, and the jokes consistently land. Not only that, but the references are very nice touches and are never shoved down your throat, unlike some other movie I know. The animation is incredibly colourful and vibrant, which just emphasises what the movie is at its core: fun. It doesn't try to get philosophical or intelligent, it just wants you to have a fun time, with a few heartwarming moments sprinkled throughout. Even though it does fall into some of the typical animated movie traps like the third act breakup, pacing moves so quickly but controlled that you hardly care. Ralph and Vanellope are two very different characters, yet they work off each other perfectly, and their friendship they build throughout the movie actually feels genuine, and not some forced moment that has to be included because Disney. And about that third act breakup, while it is possible to do this trope correctly without it seeming forced, Wreck-It Ralph has possibly the greatest use of this trope to ever be scripted.
Wait. Oh. No, please, Ralph! No! Stop it!
It's a legitimately emotional scene and actually really hard to watch. It's masterfully done and sets up the eventual climax brilliantly. Final part of this movie is very well done, with one of the best villain twists in any Disney movie, period. While there may not be much left to say on this film, it does a great job at being an enjoyable movie that video game fans will probably love. At number 19... The Nightmare Before Christmas. How could I not include this film? While I certainly don't think it's the greatest stop-motion movie of all time, it definitely deserves to be up there. The Nightmare Before Christmas is such a timeless animated classic that has had such a massive cultural impact that you'll probably still see people with merchandise for it to this very day. 26 years hasn't put a single wrinkle on this animation. It still looks great to this very day and captures the true essence of both Halloween and Christmas without coming off as incredibly jarring when the scenery switches. I absolutely adore stop motion if you couldn't already tell, so I may come off as a little biased when I notice the little charming little details and imperfections that are intentionally included, but I can't help but just geek out over them. The movie's art style has also remained timeless. I still to this very day consider this to be the best film Tim Burton ever writ and produced. Sue me. And these songs are still incredible. They're so iconic and well sung to the point where the opening song, This Is Halloween, is the first thing that pops into people's heads when they think of Halloween. But the other songs must not be forgotten about because they're still brilliant to this day. People still debate on whether or not this is a Christmas movie or a Halloween movie, but can we just say it's both? It works so well for both of these holidays that even though I find it more acceptable to watch at Halloween, can just be watched at either, and there wouldn't be a tonal problem. Nightmare Before Christmas is easily among the best stop motion films and definitely deserves to be on this list. And at number 18... Chicken Run. Speaking of stop motion, here we have the first feature-length film from Aardman. Aardman are the same people behind the iconic Wallace and Gromit and Shaun the Sheep, but I mainly knew them through Morph, but we'll get to that another day. For the first feature-length film created by a studio mainly well known for doing animated shorts, this is a very impressive feat. Once again, the animation is great even to this day, despite nearly being 20 years old. There's just something about Aardman's animation style and the high quality of the puppets they use, yes I said puppets, they have endoskeletons on the inside, that gives them a consistent appeal no matter what year you're watching their movies in or how old they are. It's one of the best things about stop motion to me, and it's why the first video I ever uploaded to YouTube years ago was my own stop motion short based on Morph. The humor is also great, which is what we usually expect from an Aardman film. It's witty and perfectly timed, there's not much of an impact when a joke doesn't land. You root for the characters, well, most of them, and it's also surprisingly dark at times. I mean, the whole story and concept is basically like the Holocaust, but some scenes of this movie genuinely had me shocked. When I was little, I remember having my fucking jaw open during this scene. They got away with a lot in this film, and I think that just makes me appreciate it even more. If an animated film is able to sneakily get away with discussing or showing mature or straight up adult subjects while still managing to be family friendly, then I consider that to be masterful storytelling. So regardless of the film's controversial nature, it's still a well animated, incredibly entertaining ride from start to finish, with fantastic voice acting as well, if I might add. And at number 17, Coco. Yes, I think this movie is overrated. That being said, I love this movie. I can definitely see why some people see this as one of Pixar's greatest films, even though I don't personally see eye to eye of that statement. This movie is not only great at educating people on Mexican culture, but it also works as a competently made and tear-jerking film. Yes, I won't lie that I cried at this movie towards the end. It's a very hard-hitting and emotionally honest film about death, and even though people go to the land of the dead when they die in the real world, the movie still acknowledges permanent death, and doesn't try to sugarcoat it. And I find that to be incredibly respectful and honest. These characters are also believable and likable despite their very obvious flaws that they just can't help. And you can tell that Miguel's family, while harsh on his love of music, clearly love and care for him. And that makes this scene where they destroy his guitar incredibly heart-wrenching. One thing you can usually guarantee with a Pixar film is that even if they had the odd black sheep every once in a while, you can always count on them having great characters who act like real human beings, even if they aren't human sometimes as well. It's one of the reasons why they're loved by so many people. Also, this movie looks absolutely stunning. Land of the Dead specifically is brimming with color and personality, and I swear every time I go to see a Pixar movie, the animation somehow gets better and better even when I think they've reached their peak. And let's talk about the songs. Yes, to all of them. There is not a single bad song in this film. They're all fun, emotional, or just straight up nice to listen to. They earned that Oscar. So with great animation, emotional and hard-hitting moments, and honest looks at death, Coco, while not the greatest Pixar has to offer, is still absolutely fantastic. And for number 16, Arthur Christmas. Here's one you probably didn't expect or even heard of for that matter. Arthur Christmas is another Aardman film that departs from their usual stop motion and into CG. And I have to say, for their second CG animated film, this looks really good. While the character designs look a little weird in comparison to every other animated film released, there's still a certain unique charm to it that's present throughout the whole movie. Also, this is my favourite Christmas movie, Fight Me. The whole experience is so warm and good-hearted and so incredibly difficult to remotely dislike. It's clear that this movie's intention is to make you happy, and at the end of the day, that's all a Christmas movie needs to do. But it goes above and beyond with that sort of goal, as it does everything it can be to be as entertaining and lovable as possible. The mere idea of Santa and the elves in the 21st century with new technology and coordination is absurdly creative, and the movie wants to highlight the pros and cons to both new and old technology through the character of Grand Santa, who is pretty much just like every other cranky old man frustrated with new traditions. But the upside is that he actually realizes this over time and begins to accept that things have moved on. Also, this movie is ridiculously funny, like possibly the funniest movie Aardman's ever made. There are moments in this film that have had me laughing simply for remembering them for days. It's some of the wittiest dialogue ever written for an Aardman film.
Toronto. Toronto's in Canada! The Santas always come through Canada. Nobody lives here. It's nice and quiet.
And the end of this movie is just utter perfection. It makes you feel so warm on the inside and happy on the outside, and the whole movie just has its heart in the right place throughout, which is hard to find in many things that aren't done by Disney nowadays, especially for a film that released in 2011. There's really not much left to say. If you like Christmas movies, then watching this is a must. It's so incredibly funny, warm, and uplifting that I'd be surprised if you actually disliked it. And at number 15, Coraline. Laika are probably the kings of dark stop-motion movies. While Nightmare Before Christmas is definitely spooky, it combines that spook with the friendliness of the people in the movie. Coraline, on the other hand, is a full-on horror movie and I fucking love it. One thing to note about Laika is that they have some of the smoothest and most fluid stop-motion I've ever seen. So much effort is put into every single nanosecond of footage, and it's clear just by looking at these characters move on screen, like, just look at that! Oh yeah, and this movie is terrifying. It's incredibly dark and disturbing for a movie rated PG, and while I have no problem with films pushing the boundaries of censorship and age ratings, this film should not have been rated PG. That being said, as a fan of horror, I definitely loved how dark it was. But the movie is also funny and entertaining. It's just this weird mix of tones that would usually clash in most movies but works so well here. This was the movie that actually introduced a lot of people to Laika, and I'm glad that it did, as this was certainly a great first impression for a lot of people. Coraline is scary, entertaining, and incredibly dark, and deserves to be Laika's flagship movie. Unfortunately, I can't really go in depth without giving away some of the best parts of this movie, so I'm just expecting you to take my word and watch it if you haven't. And at number 14... The Lion King. Come on, it had to be on here somewhere. How could I not include this movie? It's essentially a must-see for anyone currently living. While the songs may not have aged too well, besides Hakuna Matata obviously, seriously, this is like the one Elton John song that I dislike, and speaking of Elton John, have any of you seen Rocketman yet? The instrumentals to this day are powerful. In fact, if it wasn't for the typical and cheesy Disney songs thrown in throughout the movie, then this movie's soundtrack would be among one of my favorite soundtracks of all time. Every drum, how every instrument played is impactful. The animation is also traditionally hand-drawn, as it was made during the Disney Renaissance, and my god, it still looks beautiful today. Its color palette is rich and it flows so mesmerizingly well. It's such a shame that Disney doesn't do 2D animation anymore. The last one we had was The Princess and the Frog back in 2009. Oh my god, this movie is 10 years old! And while that was certainly a good movie, and criminally underrated by the way, the fact that Disney hasn't done more 2D films, despite the fact that it made back its budget, is very depressing. Back onto Lion King, I think everyone knows by now that this movie pretty much solidified Disney movies as being capable of inducing emotions. Jesus, Mufasa's death gets me every time, man! It works as a drama incredibly well, and even though the humor seems misplaced at times, it still gets a few laughs out of me every now and then. I just feel even more depressed about the live action film now. It's literally just a shot-for-shot remake without any of the animation that gave it style, color, and personality. May I also mention how all the animals and backgrounds are CGI, meaning that the movie isn't actually live action. I mean, sure, it's impressive from a technical standpoint, but come on, what's there to say that hasn't been said? This is one of the most iconic Disney films, hell, animated films ever made, and for a damn good reason. And at number 13... Aladdin. Coming back in with another one from the Disney Renaissance, Aladdin is another movie that has been praised and loved by everyone on Earth, so I'll try and get through this quickly. This film is filled to the brim with personality, a great story, fantastic animation, and what else? Oh yeah, Genie.
10,000 years will give you such a crick in the neck.
The Genie steals the show entirely. Robin Williams gave such an incredible performance that the character has been widely recognized by everyone as one of the most entertaining animated characters in existence. Robin's performance is filled with such manic energy and an absolute shit ton of pop culture related humor. Essentially, the more you know about, well, anything, will allow you to laugh more and more at what Genie says. Hell, I've watched this movie more than 10 times and I'm still just finding out about some of these references. And unlike Lion King, Aladdin's songs have aged like fine wine. They're all entertaining, energetic, and sometimes beautiful, and I'm pretty sure you know what song I'm talking about. Again, I'm still depressed about the live action film because it has none of the charm, personality, or anything, and I'm sorry, but Will Smith's Genie is just weak in comparison to Robin. Aladdin has remained endlessly entertaining and fun for so many years now, and is certainly among one of Disney's greatest films. And at number 12... Isle of Dogs. Wes Anderson and animation work so naturally well together that just trying to comprehend it makes my brain hurt. Isle of Dogs is exactly what you would expect from Wes Anderson. Deadpan humor, unique direction style, and earnest and human character interactions. Yes, I just said that dogs had human interactions, shut up. The movie, while pretty funny at times, isn't exactly a comedy. It's dark, and certainly not for kids. I mean, it's rated PG-13 for a reason. Oh, come on, UK! That aside, Isle of Dogs is beautifully animated, and the amount of detail on these puppets is mind-blowing. It looks so much like real fur, it's amazing. The story is also pretty good and engaging, and the score, while nothing you really take notice of, is still incredible once you actually listen to it. It definitely deserves an Oscar, I'm just saying. I just love the tone of this film so much. It's not every day or even year you see an animated film as dark and serious as this. This movie could definitely be considered very love it or hate it, as Wes Anderson's style of filmmaking is pretty controversial with how deadpan the characters are and the way the character is positioned and moves. But as someone who loves Wes Anderson's movies, specifically The Grand Budapest Hotel, I totally dug this movie's direction. It's not for everyone with its style and also how touchy it can be with its subject matter. That and the final confrontation of the movie being pretty rushed. But besides those downsides, there really isn't much wrong with this movie. It's simply just down to whether or not you like Wes Anderson. And really, having directors with different styles is a very good thing. You don't want to go to the cinema and see the same style of bland direction with basic camera movements every single time, because then every movie, regardless of its script, would feel exactly the same. I would definitely recommend Isle of Dogs if you haven't seen it. And at number 11, Finding Nemo. This movie was a massive part of my childhood. It was actually the second Pixar movie I ever watched. To put it simply, this movie is beautiful. I still find it remarkable that Pixar is able to make people feel emotion for toys, bugs, and fucking fish, but I'm certainly not complaining. While I never cried at this movie, I always recognize how beautiful and emotional this film is, while also being funny and charming, may I add. The relationship between Marlin and Nemo is believable. You understand why Marlin is so overprotective of Nemo, and the struggles in their relationship with each other because of that. It not only allows kids with overprotective parents to relate to Nemo, but it also allows those overprotective parents to relate to Marlin, and this movie teaches kids and parents valuable lessons. If I had to bring up 10 films that challenge the idea that animation is for kids, this would certainly be one of them. The score is gentle and not that memorable, but goddamn does it work when it works. The animation is also still good to this day, and that might have to do with the fact that the movie is set underwater, because the only difference between this movie and its sequel is that in Finding Dory, some parts are a little more detailed, and the parts out of water naturally look better because of how much Pixar has improved. And for some reason, I barely see anyone talk about this movie anymore. I mean, I know it's been a long time since it came out, but I hardly ever see anyone talking about it anymore, despite it being one of Pixar's best films. And Jesus Christ, can we please just talk about that opening? My god, heart-wrenching isn't even a good enough word to describe it. It's all happy-go-lucky, and then it immediately slaps you right in the fucking face with one of the most tragic and intense moments in any Pixar film to date. The look on Marlin's face when he realizes that his wife and all the fucking children have been killed except for Nemo is just, I can't really explain it. It's intense for a movie that many seem to claim is one of Pixar's most childish films, simply because the rest of the movie doesn't get this adult. Finding Nemo is a beautiful and touching film that is a definite must-see. And at number 10, Up. Speaking of one of Pixar's best films, Up is a movie that tends to be judged just because of its first 10 minutes. However, the entire movie is still filled with enough wonder, joy, and heart-tugging emotion to easily make it one of Pixar's best, in my opinion. Although, yes, those first 10 minutes are absolutely incredible. And while the movie doesn't quite reach the heights of this first 10 minutes again until the third act, it's still funny and very enjoyable. There are quite a lot of moments in this movie where I just burst out laughing. It might not be Pixar's sharpest comedy, but it definitely works and keeps me thoroughly entertained throughout.
Here, let me talk to him. You in the suit? Yes, you. Take a bath, hippie. I am not with him.
This is serious. He's out to get your house.
Tell your boss he can have our house. Really? When I'm dead.
I'll take that as a maybe.
But at Up's center is its main character, Carl, who seems like the average cranky old man, but when you watch the movie, you understand why he's so pissed off at everything. And later on in the movie, when he breaks down and shouts at Doug and Russell, it just tells you that this is a broken old man simply trying to fulfill a lifetime goal. I know I've said the word believable a lot in this video, but Pixar are the masters of creating sympathetic characters that we constantly love and root for, despite their obvious flaws. I'm tempted to say that this is Pixar's most hard-hitting film if we're talking emotionally. It deserves every bit of praise it got, definitely including that Best Picture nomination. Those 10 minutes god, those 10 minutes, specifically the montage of Carl and Ellie's lives together, is masterfully crafted. It starts happy, then slowly progresses into something so depressing and hard-hitting. You just see Carl sat alone at Ellie's funeral and can't help but feel exactly what he's feeling. Up is a film that many can't really decide on, but I personally think it's fantastic. And at number 9, Fantastic Mr. Fox. What? You put Mr. Fox over Up? Explain yourself, demon! Put down your pitchforks, you angry motherfucker, hear me out. While Mr. Fox isn't exactly emotional, the interactions between characters and the dialogue feels so natural and real that you can practically hear the connections that these characters have in their voices. Not only that, but while Isle of Dogs' animation was definitely spectacular, Fantastic Mr. Fox is just a lot more colourful and gives a lot more of a welcoming atmosphere as opposed to the mature and dark essence Isle of Dogs gives off. In fact, the whole movie is just a massive tonal whiplash compared to Isle of Dogs. It's a lot funnier and wittier, and it's very clear that many parts of it are just meant to be entertaining.
What's that? What? I think it's a fox trap. Look at this.
No, get away from there.
Is it spring-loaded? Yeah, I guess if you come from over there and you're standing at this door to the squab shack, this little gadget probably triggers the...
What?
Move out of the way, darling. That's right where it's gonna land.
Don't. Let's go.
No, it just falls straight right down.
But I love how it explores Mr. Fox having a midlife crisis. I love that Wes Anderson's style doesn't change at all, no matter what movie you're watching, and I love the voice acting and I love the music. I adore this movie for not just being visually fantastic, but for depicting real characters just as animals, and most of all, I love that this movie remains faithful to the original book by Roald Dahl, while also putting a modern spin on it. As seen with all of the adaptations of Dahl's work, being faithful to the original can produce mixed results, as his stories don't really work too well in live action, because one of the best things about Dahl's writing is the great use of creative language, humor, onomatopoeia, and in general, if you're going to try and adapt one of his stories directly from the book with a few tweaks, it isn't going to leave as much of a good impact. The original Willy Wonka in 1971 is a good example of staying true to the source material of his work, but it does still have its issues, and don't get me started on these train wrecks. So to see Wes Anderson blend his own style in with Dahl's storytelling almost flawlessly is mesmerizing. It's just such a great film, and it makes me sad that not enough people recognize how great it truly is. You can argue that Up should be over this, seeing as how I just praised the hell out of it for being emotional, but Mr. Fox is a film where you really need to have a specific kind of taste to enjoy it. So please don't tear me apart for this. And at number 8, Toy Story 1, 2, and 3. I was going to write Toy Story Trilogy, but curse you, Pixar. Nevertheless, this is Pixar's flagship franchise, and was their flagship trilogy, and it's been praised for 2 whole decades, and for good reason. These movies are amazing. Unlike most trilogies, Toy Story is one of the only trilogies to be consistently perfect with every installment. You just can't choose a favorite Toy Story film, they're all absolutely phenomenal. The first Toy Story was the first CG animated feature-length film, and it definitely does show, but the animation is still acceptable. But this was a great first movie, bursting with endlessly quotable lines, fantastic humor, and an equally fantastic voice cast and great characters with emotional arcs that made them better by the end of the movie. The second movie improved on the first in a lot of ways and had an incredibly tear-jerking scene with some great humor. And the third movie is the perfect way to end a trilogy, cough cough, with suspenseful drama, a lot of dark moments, glorious animation, and an ending so dark and tear-inducing that it rivals most quote-unquote adult films with forced emotional arcs. These movies are masterpieces of not just animation but movies in general. They can be funny, they can be sad, they can be exciting, and they can be even more sad. They're not only nostalgic to look back on, but even with nostalgia goggles off, they're still lovable and well-made films that pretty much define Pixar. Memorable voice acting and characters coupled with well-rounded stories, they deserve their reputation as some of the finest animated films to ever be created.
So long, partner.
And at number 7, Kubo and the Two Strings. Laika strikes back with a film that should have won Best Animated Feature over Zootopia, but alas, you just gotta pick Disney. Yeah, Disney wins all the time. These awards are really fair. Kubo is another beautifully and stunningly animated feature that again should have won that award. It's a sad, thrilling and beautiful film that, while having some funny moments, doesn't shy away from being more complex than the average animated flick. It embraces the imperfections of humanity and leaves the viewers with a great message, and that's all well and good, but I swear Laika's animation gets better with each film. They've officially reached a point where what's on screen looks like actual CG animation, but at the same time it's obviously stop motion, which makes it look even more stunning. Seriously, the amount of time and effort that goes into stop motion is unbelievable, and it's such a shame that people don't want to see these movies as much as big budget CG movies. I honestly don't want to get into much with this film because I think it's best experienced blind. It's a fantastic treat of a film that could only ever come from Laika. And at number 6, Mary and Max. Wow, this movie is just wow. I only watched this movie recently after so many people recommended it. I had no idea how mind-blowingly great it was. Why has literally no one talked about this film? This is an artistically sophisticated, mature, visually unique masterpiece of a film that says so much with just 90 minutes. When people ask what actually qualifies as being considered adult, I will always point to this film from now on. Mary and Max covers so many sensitive and adult topics without sugarcoating anything. It goes over autism, religion, obesity, and depression, just to name only a few. The movie chronicles the friendship between Mary and Max as they grow up, and as time goes on, the movie gets more and more intense. Mary is an 8-year-old girl from New Zealand, and Max is a 40-year-old man with Asperger's living in New York. It's such a weird combination of character that works surprisingly well. Coupled with its unique visual style, gives this movie a clear identity that it's not here to just have fun or to be profanely immature, unlike most adult movies. It shows that it wants to be recognized as an important, mindful, and timely movie, with characters that aren't either good or bad, but are just real. These feel like real people, and that's the point. Although the movie is still pretty funny at times, the humor is done in such a way that makes you feel uneasy or puts you on edge when you find it funny. It's dark humor at its finest, and as an Aspie myself, Max is just the perfect way to represent autism. It isn't pandering to people with autism, and it doesn't treat it like it's a mental illness. It's just part of who we Aspies are, and we shouldn't try to change that.
Dr. Bernard Hasselhoff says my brain is defective, but one day there will be a cure for my disability. I do not like it when he says this. I do not feel disabled, defective, or a need to be cured. I like being an Aspie. It would be like trying to change the color of my eyes.
This movie is important and completely timeless. I would recommend it to just about everyone I know. It's a movie that you definitely must see. And at number 5, the Lego Movie. This movie is living proof that just because you're a glorified toy commercial doesn't mean you can't at least try to be good. The Lego Movie is absolutely outstanding, as it not only boasts an incredible and colourful style of animation, but it also has a ton of heart, so many jokes per minute that will almost give you a heart attack, great social commentary, a level of self-awareness that would make Deadpool blush, and the whole thing knows it's just cartoonishly silly and just rolls with it. It's full of good references, great voice acting, and top-notch writing.
President Business is gonna end the world? But he's such a good guy. In Octan, they make good stuff. Music, dairy products, coffee, TV shows, surveillance systems, all history books, voting machines. Wait a minute.
Phil Lord and Christopher Miller are my favourite directing duo, as they're responsible for some of the greatest animated films of the last decade. Oh yeah, and Jump Street. The movie is constantly moving at such a rapid pace and firing a million jokes a minute, while still allowing you to take in how frantic the animation is. Seriously, I love how they intentionally slowed everything down to make it look like stop motion, and for the insane level of detail like chips and scratches on the minifigures. Little details like that just tell me that I straight up can't dislike this movie if I tried. It has way too much charm squeezed into it with every scene for me to give it a negative review, but at the same time, the movie proves itself to be a lot more complex and just colourful animation and tons of jokes, as presented by the final act of the movie, specifically the end scene with Emmett's confrontation with Lord Business.
Look at all of these things that people built. You might see a mess. What I see are people, inspired by each other and by you. People taking what you made and making something new out of it. The prophecy is made up, but it's also true. It's about all of us. Right now, it's about you. And you still can change everything.
I like how it acknowledges the different types of LEGO builders, the ones who want perfection and the ones who just want to be creative. It analyzes the pros and cons of both following instructions and just letting your imagination run free, by combining both together. It's clear that this movie has its heart in the right place, and I definitely respect that. The LEGO Movie is a fantastic film that's equally entertaining as it is heartwarming, and while LEGO Movie 2 may have probably spelled out the end for this franchise with its really bad box office numbers, the first movie will always hold a special place in my heart. And at number 4, WALL-E. WALL-E seems to have been forgotten about, and that's a damn shame, as I think it's one of the best things Pixar have ever had the pleasure of making. Everything about this movie screams perfection. From the second this movie begins, you know you're in for something special. The atmosphere at the start of this movie is amazing. This movie is a moving and thought-provoking masterpiece. Again, the fact that Pixar manages to make me feel emotions towards goddamn robots is outstanding. This is a love story between two robots that has barely any words, yet you feel every hint of emotion between them, and that is absolutely masterful. In fact, the entire first act of this film is nearly completely devoid of any dialogue. It really makes you feel the impact of WALL-E's loneliness and how pretty much dead the earth is after being abandoned due to pollution. This movie works so well as a love story, but also as a cautionary tale about pollution and saving the environment, and it's executed flawlessly. And the movie still manages to be funny even with its bleak subject matter. Oh, and can I just say right now, the fine dancing scene is absolutely phenomenal. The best scene in the entire movie, bar none. It's just unbelievable levels of perfect that you can only understand by watching it. It really is that great of a scene. While some people may dislike it because its message may be a little too preachy, and I definitely understand that, this movie is so much more than the message about how the planet's going to die if we continue to be stupid. It's a fantastically made film with one of the best love stories I've seen in film, and again, it's two robots. And at number 3, The Incredibles. Oh shit boys, daddy's home. You guys probably already know exactly what I think about this film and may be surprised as to why it's gone down by 2 places in the span of a few months. And that's because the second place goes to 3 movies that I recently rediscovered my love for, and the first I'm keeping as a surprise. So yeah, I'll try and keep this as short as I can, but The Incredibles is Pixar's magnum opus. It's not only an incredibly stylish, funny and entertaining ride throughout, but it's also dark and goes over a lot of topics most movies wouldn't even touch. I mean, in the first 15 minutes of this film, we have guns, attempted suicide, lawsuits, and politics, and Bob having a midlife crisis on top of that. Not to mention, this movie has a lot of death. Despite being a superhero movie, the whole world feels real with how many mature things are happening. The characters are great and memorable, and this film is filled with some of the most quotable lines in movie history.
Knock it!
Where is my super suit?
It's a ton of fun and filled to the brim with wit. While the sequel was good, it definitely missed a lot of what made its predecessor so unique and amazing. The score is also just absolutely divine. I'm sure you've heard every bit of praise possible for this movie at this point, so I'll shut up here. It's a classic and one of my favorite movies ever made. And for number 2, the How to Train Your Dragon Trilogy. This probably caught a lot of you off guard, but hey, I don't care. I'm just here to appreciate a franchise that I love to death. How to Train Your Dragon is the best DreamWorks franchise and one of the greatest trilogies ever, and it definitely deserves to have those titles. Unlike most of what DreamWorks makes, How to Train Your Dragon is a massive breath of fresh air, or fire if you prefer. When the first movie came out in 2010, it was adored by critics and audiences alike for being exciting, gorgeously animated, and emotionally resonant. It's no secret at this point that these films are darker and more mature than anything DreamWorks has ever done before it. Not only are there actual consequences that stay permanent with no way to reverse them, but the whole world feels so realistic despite being infested with dragons. The moment at the end of the first movie where Hiccup loses his leg just tells you all you need to know about the emotional center of these films. These things happen in real life and there's no way to reverse things, it's just how life is. And this is further shown from the second and third movies, which are both just as great as the first, and in some cases even better. I strongly believe these are two of the greatest sequels ever made. They expand upon the characters and the lore of this massive world while keeping the same light on your feet humor and tear-jerking emotion that made the first so amazing. There's always something to be said for when characters in movies feel like real people with flaws, hopes, and relationships, and these movies definitely earn brownie points for that. From shocking revelations to simple banter, you know that these characters hold each other close and care for each other. And I know I've said a few times that I've cried through some of the films on this list, but they were usually moments that had me shed a tear or two. But these movies, my god, these are movies that have actually left me crying multiple times no matter how many times I've watched them. In fact, I want you to just watch this scene from the second movie when Stoic finds that Valka is still alive after believing she was dead after 20 years. This scene is absolutely masterful and leaves me in tears every time.
I know what you're gonna say, Stoic. How could I have done this? Stayed away all of these years, and why didn't I come back to you? To our son? Well, what sign did I have that you could change, Stoic? That anyone on Burke could? I pleaded so many times to stop the fighting, to find another answer, but did any of you listen?
This is why I never married. This and one other reason.
I know that I left you to raise Hiccup alone, but I thought he'd be better off without me. And I was wrong. I see that now, but... Oh, stop being so stoic. Go on. Shout, scream, say something!
You're as beautiful as the day I lost you.
Stoic's reaction says it all. Valka's dialogue says it all. This scene melts my heart every time because of the superb voice acting and the reactions of the characters. And all of this amazingness has been said without even talking about the animation of these movies. It gets better and better with every installment with an incredible amount of attention to detail and eye-popping colors. The flying scenes specifically are breathtaking and captivating. The wind constantly blowing, the camera shaking every time something goes past, and the fast but controlled and relaxing pace of it all, coupled with an absolutely powerful and beautiful soundtrack. These movies are some of the best soundtracks of any movie, period. They go well with every scene and can excite, suspend, and pull at your heartstrings. Like the moment when Hiccup throws away his cheat sheet in the first movie and just relies on his gut feelings. An already powerful scene is made even better with great animation and an undeniably powerful score. The How to Train Your Dragon trilogy is undeniably incredible. It pushes the boundaries of DreamWorks and animation as a whole, and it's such a shame that it's over after that ending. I cannot talk about that fucking ending yet, but God was it emotional.
And we'll guard the secret until the time comes when dragons can return in peace.
And before we get to number 1, I'd like to go over some honorable mentions. The Kung Fu Panda trilogy. These are again some of DreamWorks' best films. They're well animated, mature, and very entertaining. I would have loved to include them on this list, but a lot of other movies took priority over it. Also, the third one, while still good, was kind of underwhelming. The Lego Batman movie. This movie was absolutely hilarious. It not only had more jokes than the Lego movie, but nearly every single one worked and got more than a few really loud laughs out of me. The only reason why it's not on this list is because the Lego Movie was still a better film overall, and there were a lot of meta Batman jokes that kind of brought the movie down to being enjoyed the most by Batman fans, which I certainly am, but objectively it's just not as great as the Lego Movie. I'd probably put this movie at number 21 if I could. Monsters Inc. Another iconic Pixar film that was still great, just wasn't as good as the other Pixar movies that were on this list. Also, I don't really love this movie as much as everyone else does, but it's still very funny to this day. Shrek 2. Yes, even though Shrek is a massive meme, I genuinely thought his sequel was really good. It still falls into the same traps the first did, and it's still a very early DreamWorks era film, so it still has plenty of pop songs and moments that were straight up mediocre, but overall, it's a massive improvement over the first, and I'd highly recommend it. Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs. This was Lord & Miller's first animated movie, and damn was it a good one. While nothing absolutely remarkable, Cloudy is still a very funny, uniquely animated, and very silly movie that does require a level of tolerance to actually enjoy, seeing as how it's constantly running high on sugar. Anyway, on to number 1. And my number 1 favorite animated movie of all time is... Yeah, you probably weren't expecting this.
Ladies and gentlemen, report to the dance floor. Report to the dance floor. I feel like getting crazy.
Oh yeah, bitches, I love this movie that much. That being said, what to say about this film? Where to start? Into the Spider-Verse is not only my favorite superhero movie and favorite animated movie, it's my favorite movie of all time, which is remarkable of how many I've watched. This is a stunning and strikingly animated, absolutely hilarious and emotionally moving masterpiece of a film that, even though it wasn't intended to be, is the apology the world needed after Sony gave us this animated abortion. The story, while it is the third Spider-Man origin story in 20 years, remains fresh and incredibly well written. The jokes are witty and perfectly timed, and not a single one failed to amuse me, whether it's me smiling or laughing my ass off. With a lot of references to previous Spider-Man related media, the characters are incredibly likable, including joke characters like Penny Parker and Spider-Ham, who are all entertaining and unique in their own way. Miles is the best character they could have gone for with this movie. Having a Spider-Man movie with a protagonist who isn't Peter Parker is incredibly refreshing. And speaking of Peter, we get a depressed, middle-aged version of the character who's not only incredibly funny with how he's pretty much just done with being Spider-Man and can project typical villain cliches, it's also a great and believable character who has a very understandable reason for why he does what he does. This movie's soundtrack is also absolutely amazing. I'm usually not a massive fan of rap or hip-hop, but for some reason I loved every song in this movie's soundtrack. They all fit so well with the tone of the movie and the tone of each scene. My god, I love Sunflower. But that's not to downplay the actual pieces that are used in this movie, because every single piece composed for this film is amazing, including giving us the best Spider-Man theme to date. Also, every track for Prowler has me on the edge of my fucking seat. And let's just get more in depth with the animation. Holy fucking shit! This is the single greatest looking movie I have ever watched. The comic book art style mixed with the movie's actual animation that is intentionally meant to complement the art style is stunning and my personal aesthetic. The way everything moves is done to make it seem like you're flipping through a comic book, and every tiny minute detail makes it all the more impressive, like the visual comic sound effects that appear in one frame with every punch, kick, or bagel, surprisingly. The little Ben-Day dots in comic books that appear on the screen when a bright light flashes. The neon colors, the glitch effects, everything just clicks, and it's ridiculous how well it works. It's also not short on plenty of emotional moments and dark scenes that leave you shocked. This movie feels like a celebration of what Spider-Man is, and that's definitely apparent from the message it sends. It makes it perfectly clear that anyone can be a hero, superpowers or not, and that's the perfect message they could have gone with. It makes me so incredibly sad that Stan Lee and Steve Ditko are no longer with us, because this was the ultimate celebration and embodiment of one of their most iconic characters. And I feel comfortable calling this my favorite animated movie of all time and my favorite movie ever.
Anyone can wear the mask. You could wear the mask. If you didn't know that before, I hope you do now.
Well, that was incredibly long. I would like to thank you if you managed to watch the video up to this point, and thank you so much for 1,000 subscribers. Yes, I know it's late, but better late than never, I guess. And I'm also definitely curious as to what your favorite animated movies are, so if you would like to leave them down in the comments, then that would be very much appreciated. Be sure to like the video and share it around if you want to, and if you're new here, then please consider subscribing. Thanks for watching, I've been Cartoonji, have yourselves a great night, day, or whatever it is in your time zone, and until next time, stay great.